I hope everybody's had a good breakfast and is ready for today. Good morning. My name is Jane Burpee, and I am Centennial's Director of the Libraries and the Learning Centers.
And my name is Barb Weisfeld, and I'm the manager of the Center for Academic English.
We would like to begin by welcoming all of you here this morning, those of you from the college and those of you who are from our community around the area, for joining us for what promises to be a very powerful and informative learning experience. Before we go to the main program, as we do at all our meetings and events at Centennial, we're going to start the morning with a land acknowledgement, and two of our students will be reading it today. Can I ask Cheyenne and Eli to come forward and read that for us?
Hi, I'm Eli. I'm of the Mohawk Nation.
And hi, I'm Cheyenne. I'm Enoch.
First, we wanted to acknowledge that normally these are done by non-Indigenous, but today we decided to come and do it to stand with the Holocaust survivors.
Okay. So, Centennial College is proud to be a part of a rich history of education. In this province, in Toronto, we acknowledge that we are on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of Credit First Nation and pay tribute to their legacy and the legacy of First Peoples of Canada. As we strengthen ties with the community, we serve and build the future through learning and through graduates. We honor and pay tribute to their citizens and ancestors for the spirit and energy that allows for Centennial College to provide the educational opportunity for their relations.
The Mississauga Nation has a strong story about their heritage and history. Like them, we are a nation of stories, and these stories are our legacy. Today, the traditional meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the communities that have grown in the treaty lands of the Mississaugas. We acknowledge that we are all treaty people and accept our responsibility to honor all our relations.
And before we begin, we have a few housekeeping items, as always. Our washrooms are located on the right and down the hall. In the event of a fire or other emergency requiring evacuation, we will make an announcement with directions on how to exit the venue. Event Center staff will help in directing you out of the building. On January 1st, 2019, Centennial College adopted a smoke-free policy, which means that smoking or vaping is prohibited on all Centennial properties, including our satellite locations, student residence, and event center. Smoking and vaping is also prohibited in any vehicle, including personal vehicles, while on college property. However, smoking is permitted on city property, which includes the sidewalk just outside campus boundaries. For Progress Campus, this is located on Progress Avenue, outside the campus entrance. Kindly note that we will be taking pictures throughout the event, and we apologize in advance for those who prefer not to have their pictures taken. Please feel free to face away from the cameras.
We are so grateful to have joined us this morning, that you have joined us this morning for the annual Holocaust Education Week event. This is the 17th year that Centennial College has hosted an educational event for Holocaust Education Week. And we would like to acknowledge John and Molly Pollock, who generously donated their Holocaust collection to Centennial College back in the year 2000, leading Centennial to host our very first Holocaust Education Week event in 2001. The John and Molly Pollock collection is held at Centennial Libraries and is available for consultation by students, faculty, staff, and actually everyone who wishes to visit Centennial College Libraries. So we encourage any of you who have an interest to learn more about the collection to come visit the libraries. As well, today, selected books from the collection are on display this morning, and I'm not sure where they are. Goshat? They're right outside. So please, when there's a moment, take a moment to have a look. At this point, I have the pleasure of introducing the MCs for this morning's program, a mother-daughter duo. Pepe Lucas is a former faculty member from the School of Advancement, and her daughter, Ilana Lucas, is also now at the Faculty of Advancement as a faculty member. Ilana has been an instrumental part of the Holocaust Education Week Planning Committee. The two of them today will introduce the program and our honored keynote speaker, Max Eisen.
If you survive, you must tell the world what happened here. Now go. These are the last words that Dr. Max Eisen's father told him when they were separated at the Auschwitz concentration camp. Eisen, just 15 years old, had already been witness to more horror than most of us could even imagine. In his phenomenal memoir, By Chance Alone, a remarkable true story of courage and survival at Auschwitz, which One Canada reads this year, he writes, "The situation was dehumanizing, debilitating, and devastating, both psychologically and physically." He lived in a world where individuals and families could, in an instant, be removed from their homes and disappear. Eisen is dedicated to telling his and their stories as life markers, reminding the world that these people had lived.
Dr. Eisen was born in Moldova, Czechoslovakia. When he was 10 years old, Hungary occupied Slovakia, and eventually, in 1944, his family was deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Most of them were immediately murdered in gas chambers. Max, his father and uncle, worked as slave laborers, but 2 months later, his father and uncle were selected out for experiments, never to be seen again. Max managed to survive the death march in January 1945 to Mauthausen, Melk, Ebensee. He was liberated by the American 761st Black Panther Tank Division on May 6, 1945. Eventually, he returned to Czechoslovakia, where he spent 3 years in an orphanage. Max arrived at Quebec City in October 1949 and eventually moved to Toronto, where he has lived since.
This program is about testimony, storytelling, and commitment to scholarship. Though Eisen writes that, in truth, it was easier to exist in a state of denial than to face this horrible reality, as global citizens, it is important that we do not exist in a state of denial over tremendous injustice. With the alarming rise of totalitarian governmental practices and increasingly hateful rhetoric, now more than ever, it is important to connect to the past to provide answers for the future.
After Dr. Eisen tells his story, it will be your chance to participate in a response. Students in our Global Citizenship course have designed posters of their scholarship related to the human face and causes of genocide. These projects will continue a difficult but necessary conversation as we move forward.
Scholarship is all about communicating and asking difficult questions. There may be time for a brief question period after Dr. Eisen's presentation. So there are question cards on each table, which will be collected near the end of the talk. We invite you to share your questions.
We are so grateful to Dr. Eisen for his presence and his story today. Please join us in welcoming him.
Thank you. Just a small correction. It is Moldova. Moldova is near Romania. So I know it sounds very similar, but being driven here this morning, I've never been here in this part of Toronto. I've been here, living here for 70 years. This was really a village when I arrived here in 1949. Beautiful university, and amazing food, and so on. So, yes. I hope everything is working here. Yeah. The Holocaust, it is actually a combination of two Greek words, holocaustos, meaning wholly consumed by fire. In Hebrew, we simply say Shoah, which means a catastrophe. In 1933, there was a big change in Europe. Nazi Germany, Hitler became the leader of this country, the most cultured country in Europe. You know, they say the old cultured world of Europa. And in that country of 60 million some odd people lived 500,000 Jews. I guess a shade, approximately 0.75% of the entire population were Jewish people. And Jews were very integrated in German life. Scientists, composers, conductors, business people. So by 1935, 2 years after he came to power, they came out with the racial laws against the Jewish people. They were called the Nuremberg racial laws. And it all started, of course, a Nazi supremacist ideology. Anyone with physical features, racial features, or religious beliefs who did not fit in the mold of the master race was supposed to be eliminated from the face, not only in Germany, but the entire world. And this modern cultured country had a ministry of propaganda. Dr. Goebbels was the minister of propaganda, and they had a massive apparatus of deception. All these tools of demonizing, dehumanizing the minority group, Jews, Roma Sinta, and words are very, very powerful and repeated 24 hours a day, 24/7. People start to believe it. So I'll just go through a few slides. I'm sorry. So the lies are repeated on a daily basis, and actually the lies become the truth. And here is Dr. Goebbels spewing his hatred, and he said he had this sophisticated machine. It wasn't a cell phone, it was a microphone, a loudspeaker, and he kept, this hatred was going around 24/7. They had a hate sheet called the Stürmer, which means the fighter, where Jews were described as rats coming from the east, and they're supposed to be killed and murdered. So Jews were depicted communists, money grabbers, posters, documentaries about Jews, and boycotts. So these laws were numerous. The first thing was boycotting Jewish stores. And there are the brown shirts of Hitler with a plaque. It said, Kauf nicht von Juden, do not buy from Jews. And boycott meant that the Jews could not sit on a park bench unless it was marked for Jews. They could only go to shop for food at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and by that time most of the goods were gone. They were thrown out from schools, public schools and university, and Jewish teachers could not teach in all these institutions either. And the next stage was divestment. The Gestapo arrived in their homes, and anybody that had massive artwork, this was photographed, and they said, make sure that we'll come back in a month from now and we'll remove all these pictures. Their bank accounts were locked, their insurance policies were taken away, they were financially ruined step by step, and sanctions were, some of them were put on trains and sent to some camps in Germany at that time, Buchenwald, Dachau, maybe Sachsenhausen. I think this BDS is probably very familiar to you. I'm not sure whether you heard it or not. And to me as a survivor, it brings back some horrible memories. I cannot believe that it has arrived in North America. And this is where it ends. These are survivors who were liberated by one of the armies. And these are people who are shooting Jews in pits and ravines. So the killing started actually seriously in 1941 when Nazi Germany attacked the Soviet Union. In the Ukraine, in Belarus, in Ossetia, Transnistria, millions of Jews were shot by bullets. These were called the Einsatzgruppen. They were all volunteers. And the head of this unit was Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer of the SS. He spoke to these Einsatzgruppen and he said that you are going to be the biggest heroes of the Reich, but nowhere in the annals of history will be anything written about your heroism, because we must not talk about this. The only thing that you cannot do, you must not take any pictures. You can leave any time. You cannot continue with this work that you are doing. And the laws were 1 bullet per Jew, 1 Jew per bullet, because bullets are expensive. And they realized that this was too slow. So eventually they came up with a massive pesticide, a powerful pesticide called Zyklon B gas. So this killing was documented recently, the last 15, 20 years ago, by a Roman Catholic priest, Father Patrick de Bois. He wrote a book, Holocaust by Bullets, and he discovered mass graves of Jews in those countries, Ukraine, Belarus, and he only wanted to make sure that these mass graves are marked as a Jewish cemetery. So let me go back a few years. And the liberation by Russian troops, January 27. Here is a SS officer who was being stripped of his rank, and behind him there is a truckload of bodies. There's somebody's children, somebody's brother, somebody's sister. There were millions, there are no names. Most of them were gassed or beaten to death or starved from hunger. And there's a tattooed number. A child, maybe a grandchild or a great-grandchild, is asking a grandfather, what is that number? It is, I'm very fortunate that I have 3 great-grandchildren, and the oldest great-grandchild, she was about 6 or 7, and she asked, she calls me Gramps. She says, Gramps, what is that blue thing on your arm? I said, well, when you get older, your mommy will tell you. She said, no, I want to know now. Well, that means that you are no longer a human being, you are only a number. So, this is continental Europe. I was born in Czechoslovakia, a democratic country. See, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Yugoslavia came on the scene in 1919 after the First World War, the Versailles Treaty. And our guarantors were Great Britain, France, and Italy. In case anybody threatens our countries, they would have to come to our aid. So, 1938, I was 9 years old. I was on my summer holidays at my grandmother's big farm, my uncles, my aunts, my beautiful cousins. I was 6 years old when I went there for my first summer holiday. And I was 9 years old when I was there for the last time in 1938. My uncle packed up my backpack and he put me on a carriage, took me down to the railway station and sent me back home. And I was wondering, I was only there a couple of weeks, and here it is. My holiday was ended. I came back home, and Czechoslovakia declared martial law because there was a Munich conference called by Hitler to decide the fate of my country. And these prime ministers from Great Britain, France, were asked to come to this crucial meeting. The Czech president was not asked to come to this meeting. And my country was simply given away on a platter to a dictator. Not a single bullet was fired simply by a stroke of a pen. And we, Czechoslovakian Jews, we knew that we are doomed. 1938 was too late. There was nowhere you could run. And that wasn't the only problem. There were no countries that would want to take us in. So, if you remember this famous picture of Prime Minister Chamberlain getting off the plane in London and waving this document that Hitler signed that he will not start a war if he's given part of my country, the Sudeten part. And he said, peace in our time. In Paris, the headlines in the papers were, no war. Champagne was flowing. Everybody was happy. And in hindsight, we know that these two prime ministers actually signed on to open the floodgates to the Second World War. So, Chamberlain wrote in his diary, which is public domain today, he said, we would not go to war for a country so far away whose name we cannot even pronounce. This was the Prime Minister of Great Britain. So the next stage was 1939, September the 1st. Poland was attacked, and they had to declare war. My country, Czechoslovakia, was made up of several ethnic groups, bordering Germany were the Sudeten Germans, Bohemia, Moravia were the Czechs, the center part were the Slovaks, the eastern part were the Magyars, the Hungarians, and I'm an ethnic Hungarian. This is the language that I spoke at home. We spoke 2-3 languages. I had to learn Slovak when I started school, but my grandparents spoke German. My grandfather, who was an officer in the First World War, fought for the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the cavalry. He was on the Russian front. So we spoke 2-3 languages. So a few months after, the Nazi troops crossed the demarcation line and entered Prague, and my country ceased to exist. So in my part of the world, the Slovak teachers, bureaucracy, and police left, and they were replaced by Hungarians. Hungary, a fascist country allied with Nazi Germany. So we Jews, we knew that we are in for a real rough ride. So my maternal family were stuck in the autonomous country of Slovakia. That was the larger part of my family, my grandmother's big farm, and my beautiful cousins. After this event, I never saw them again, and we were stuck in Hungary. We were not allowed to write postcards or see them. And in Hungary, these edicts were being posted in my town on a daily basis. My father had a crystal radio. I remember in 1938, before the partition, somehow my father found out that Hitler is making a very important speech in Berlin. It's been documented. I've seen it on documentaries many times. When Hitler declared at this meeting, and he said, if the Jews will start a war, we are going to eradicate all the Jews from the face of the world. In German, it sounds like this: Wir werden die Juden ausradieren. We're going to eradicate the Jews from the face of the world. I was 9, and my father and his friends were all in their late 30s. And somehow in my guts, I felt that something was happening, but I didn't know what. Looking at the faces of these older people, my father, when you are 9 years old and you think your father is an old man, they were sort of green in the face. And these edicts were being posted on a daily basis. My father had a distillery. He was making Slivovitz and vodka. And he had a drinking place. It was called a cellar. It was actually a cellar with vaulted ceilings where people came to drink and socialize. So the first edict, somebody in town, my town of 5,000 people, was a beautiful little town in a rural area. Farmers were well off. There were 90 Jewish families in my town, and when I look at the makeup of my towns, the Jewish families, I can sort of see them in my mind's eye. Jews practically made the town work. Jews there was a shoemaker, Mr. Gutman, made amazing shoes. There were the general store. My grandfather had a lumber yard, and so on. And we have lived there in that part of the world for 1,900 years. That part of the world was ruled by the Roman Empire. It was called Pannonia. And my family has lived there for generations. So these edicts followed. Jews cannot have a crystal radio or a bicycle. They have to take it down to town hall. Able-bodied Jewish men from 18 to 45 have to report to labor battalions, so that included almost every single family whose breadwinner had to report to a labor battalion somewhere in the southern part of Hungary, in mines or in forests that were worked. So I lived in a large house, 3 families, my grandparents, my uncle and aunt, and my family. And that was really a bonus to live in such a large house. Imagine you can check out what everybody's cooking that night, where smells were coming from my grandmother's kitchen or my aunt's. I know that when my mother made tomato soup and rice, I was running. For some reason, I just didn't like tomato soup and rice. And grandfather was really the head of the family. He ran a lumber yard. He was the man of the land. He knew animals, and my grandfather, I was working with him since I can remember, 6 years old, 7, 8, in the lumber yard, and in pruning the fruit trees. One thing that my grandfather knocked into my head, that no matter what I was going to do, he expected me to be the best at it. So, in hindsight, I think of him, all the tools that he gave me that were so important. That 1 year that I was incarcerated, I'm not sure that I could have survived. Not only my grandfather, my mother was our guardian angel, So we had a helper, my mother had a helper whose name was Anna. She came to live with us when I was born in 29. A law came out that the Jews cannot employ non-Jewish people. So she had to leave, and she didn't want to go. She's been with us now for almost 12 years, 13 years. She was like part of the family. So the gendarmes arrived, and she was removed bodily. And my mother's lot became even harder. She had 3 boys, and there's a lot of heavy work. And I think back, we lived in a beautiful home, but you couldn't just turn on the tap and water was coming out. We had a well outside, it had to be brought in from the well. You couldn't turn on the heat, the thermostat. We had a wood stove, and there was a fireplace in every bedroom. A lot of work, washing heavy clothing. So I was 12 and a half years old under the Hungarian teachers, under the system. Going to school was a big event for us Jewish kids. Every day there was a big fight in the schoolyard. We were outnumbered by 10 to 1, and your parents couldn't come and take you to school, and we had to fight our own way through this everyday business. And the teachers segregated us in the back row of the classroom. I was 12 and a half years old. I was thrown out of school. And my mother took me to the capital city of my province, which was Kasia. Today it's called Košice. It's the Slovak Republic. It's the second largest city. And I became an apprentice working in a shop. Some more skills that I learned, and discipline. I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning, walk through the dark streets, sweep and clean fur coats with sawdust and benzene, and with bare hands. That was a terrible thing. And so in 1942, we received a telegram. Somebody sent it from the Hungarian side of Slovakia, and it said that my maternal family disappeared. They were taken away. Some 60 or 70 people. It was a terrible bit of news. My mother was devastated. See, in 1942, Jews could simply disappear in continental Europe, and nobody knew where. We're living under censorship. And in 1942, we didn't know that there were ghettos built in occupied Poland, and it was the beginning of experiments in gas chambers. And even in 1944 in Hungary, we didn't know. Not knowing is a terrible thing. So they were gone, and I knew that I'll never be able to go to that farm. I had so many fond memories. So the Nazi deception, a few months after their disappearance, a postcard arrived. It had a German eagle on it, and the stamp was General Government, because Poland now was given a name, General Government. It said Lublin District. The message was, we the Friedman family, we are all here together, we are working on farms, and we are awaiting your arrival. A wonderful bit of news. There were some other 8 or 9 families that received similar postcards, and they were talking, could this be true? We had no choice. We had to accept it, hoping that perhaps it's true. So I had an aunt whose name was Aunt Bella. She was an invalid, and she lived with my grandparents in this large house, and she taught me how to read books. I think I was 5 years old. I finished all the books by Jules Verne, and my younger brother had the same chance. She was teaching him, and she died in 1943. In hindsight, it was truly a gift from God. I cannot imagine just a year down the road, when our turn came, how we would have dealt with and Bella, who was an invalid. And so this was the first member of my family that I witnessed who died. And the body was prepared in the house. They made a casket from the lumber from my grandfather's yard. And for some reason, we, the children, were not allowed to go to the cemetery. And Bella was the only one out of over 80 of my extended family who was buried in a cemetery who had a marker. The rest of them don't. And later in 43, my mother gave birth to a little girl. And that was a bad time for a Jewish child or a Jewish mother to give birth during the war. So in 1944, the last year of the war, we are celebrating Passover, which is a holiday coming from a traditional Orthodox family. The house is cleaned from top to bottom. Every bit of bread products has to be removed from the house. And the house is painted and cleaned and so on. But there are so many amazing foods that are being prepared. You can imagine a yard that we had. We had chickens, geese, and ducks. We don't eat pork, so our lard and everything was coming from geese. My mother bought coffee beans before the day of Passover, and she was roasting the coffee beans. And I really was hooked on coffee beans. I was waiting a whole year to have that coffee the first morning of Passover with the matzah, which is a unleavened bread. And I missed it. So the dinner, the Seder, which means the order of the dinner, the 4 questions asked by youngest child. Why is this night different than any other night? Why do we eat bitter herbs? So the potter tells them that we remember how difficult it is to be a slave, and all those who are hungry come and join us at our table. We retired about 12 o'clock. And we knew that next morning we'll get up at a leisurely time and walk to the synagogue. Here we were, Jews in my town, everybody had a yellow star. And we're living under not quite normal conditions. Still, we didn't know what was going on across the Carpathian, just 200 kilometers away from my home. So my grandfather, my father, and my uncle are out in the yard, 12 o'clock at night, and my grandfather said if we manage to survive here, if we manage to hold out for 4 to 5 months, we're going to be liberated by the Red Army coming from the east. So we were that close. We didn't make it. Early morning, we had a big guardian dog, a big Alsatian, whose name was Farkas. Farkas is a Hungarian name for wolf. And he always gave us a signal. We could tell the way he was barking, whether it was a friend or a foe coming towards our property. And there was a bang. They kicked in our gate. Seconds later, the door to our bedroom was kicked in, and there were 2 Hungarian gendarmes in our bedroom yelling and screaming. It was like a shock and awe treatment. And they keep saying that if you have any money or jewelry, hand it over, because where you're going to have no need of this. And you have 2 minutes to pack a bundle, and we are taking you away. So my mother, being a practical lady, she said to us, put on layers of clothing, and she grabbed my little sister. She was about 9 months old. My father said, put your boots on. Those boots that were made by Mr. Gutman, the shoemaker, saved my life. It lasted almost a whole year that I was incarcerated. And in this commotion, a neighbor comes running in. Her name was Iliklinka. She was a Christian lady, a good friend of my mother and my aunt. And the gendarmes were yelling at her, get out of here, this is not your business. But she stood her ground. She said to my mother, Ethel, where are you taking this baby? Why don't you leave the baby? And I keep thinking, imagine a mother being asked to leave her baby Had she left my little sister, it would be possible and she may have survived. You know, in Poland, when the ghettos were being liquidated, they were taken to the gas chambers in Treblinka, in Belzec, in Majdanek, you name it. Many Jewish families gave their babies to Christian families, and they all survived. The parents didn't. So we are hauled out from our home. I had a large stamp collection. And of course there was no room for a stamp collection. And 500 Jews, the 90 Jewish families, were sealed off from the town that night in the school, guarded by Hungarian gendarmes. Hungarian gendarmes are a really crude bunch. They wear black riding boots. They have a black felt hat with red rooster tail feathers. And they yell and scream. They have a big old gun with a 2-foot-long bayonet fixed to the gun. And we are sealed off in the school. It was a terrible night. Imagine, you don't know what's going on. Your home is 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes from the school. Old people whose comforts are gone, they're sitting on the floor. So when I came back a year later, after liberation, Ilya Klinka told me of what happened in town. Every Jewish home was ransacked to the bare walls. Our livestock was taken away. Chickens, geese, and ducks. Farkas was gone. They hauled out the furniture, the linen, and all the things that my mother worked so hard to collect and looked after. And the synagogue, they made a pile of the prayer books and the Talmudic books, and it was torched. Years before, there was a Jewish German poet whose name was Heinrich Heine. He said, "Those that burn books will eventually burn people." The Torah scrolls were taken out of the ark, cut into ribbons and worse. And you know, these were church-going people. There was a Roman Catholic church, there was a Protestant church, and there was a synagogue. We had a rabbi for 90 Jewish families. Next morning, we were lined up in the schoolyard, and they made a real big show, the police, that the Jews are leaving town forever. So imagine a procession of Jews, exodus of Jews. The rabbi, an older gentleman with a white beard, was made to walk in front of the flock, the 500 Jews. Mothers were not allowed to have their carriages or strollers to make their life even worse, harder. My mother had a baby in her one arm, a bundle in the other arm, and some pots and pans and a sheet on her back. You know, mothers have to think of, how am I going to feed this family? We didn't know. Carrying pots and pans, you think it's such a ridiculous thing. So, you know, the mothers had truly a tough time. And we had to walk through in the center of town, where all our neighbors, and I can't say all, but they were spitting at us, yelling at us. So 500 Jews left. 480 did not come back a year later. There were less than 20 survived from my town. There was only one mother, a Mrs. Rosenberg, with her 2 beautiful daughters. And we were delivered in a brickyard in Kasha with 30,000 Jews. And there was only 2 taps of water coming in to look after 30,000 people, and there was a communal latrine. Imagine a contraption. You could smell it for miles away. And every day a SS officer arrived, and he gave us the propaganda. You're going to be resettled in the East. You see, they had all these amazing words. They didn't say, we're going to take you to the East and kill you. They're going to resettle you in the East. Families will be together. You'll be working on farms. They repeated the same lie. And I was thinking of this postcard that arrived in 1942 from my family from Slovakia. I thought I'm going to meet up with them somewhere near Lublin. I found out after liberation, 2 years later, of what happened with these postcards. These Slovakian Jews were brought to a death camp called Majdanek, which was actually built right inside Lublin, inside the city. Before they were put into the gas chamber, they had to write a postcard to their families in Hungary. This is how they were planning the deportation of Hungarian Jews 2 years ahead. And they also prepared 2 extra rail tracks in Birkenau. And in fact, from Hungary in 1944, in 3 months, 450,000 Jews were murdered by gas. Do you think the Hungarians could have protected us? Of course, they could have. Was there a will to do it? No. So we are put into a cattle car. The journey was about 3 nights and days. The doors were locked and bolted down. Initially, they gave us a pail of water and a pail for a toilet. It's a journey that you can write a book about, your feelings, the sounds and the smells. 2 old people died, claustrophobia of some. And you can hear the cattle car, the wheels click, click, click as they hit the joints in the rail tracks. You are a total zombie. You are standing in one place. You can't move around. I couldn't see my mother. She was stuck in a corner holding a baby. And you know, the baby's cries were just fading away. They were half dead by the time we arrived on the platform. And suddenly you hear the whistle of the locomotive and you wake up with a start. And you think that you just had a nightmare, and only to realize that you're actually living a nightmare. And so we're being jockeyed back and forth, and I knew that we had finally arrived. And suddenly the door opened and light flooded in, and there was a man in a striped jacket and cap, and he was yelling at us, "Raus schnell, out fast." So we arrived in, we didn't know what this place was. We were hauled out from our cattle cars. It's like a bunch of larvae in a dark place. They start to move around. They try to find their bundles sitting in this slop on the floor. And they keep telling you the drill. Don't worry about your bundles, you will have it delivered. Selection is, men and women are separated. They're sending the women and the children for disinfection. You will see them tomorrow. All this stuff is going on the platform. And I know this from an SS guard who was on that platform when Hungarian Jews were brought to Birkenau, Auschwitz. I was at his trial in 2015 in Germany. His name was Oskar Gröning. Read up about Oskar Gröning. He was also called the bookkeeper of Auschwitz. So you see, so before I go, I just want you to look at this map of continental Europe. In 1942, I recall one of the top Nazis who was arrested. He was sitting in a jail in Spandau prison in Berlin. He wrote to his family. He says, "We didn't know in 1942 how lucky, how good we had it. This picture, they call this Festung Europa, Fortress Europe. Imagine from Belgium, Brussels, Antwerp, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Berlin, Bratislava, Budapest, Rome, Paris, Zagreb, all the way to Saloniki. Imagine locomotives pulling thousands of cattle cars with their miserable human cargo to one place, to occupied Poland, to the death camps. Trains are going from all points, continental Europe, to here. Birkenau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Belzec, Skamno, Sobibor, thousands of transports. Not a single transport was sabotaged in continental Europe, taking these people to their death. You think people didn't know? These transports were standing on railways, stations. People were yelling, "We need water." You see, terrible things happen when good people stand by and do nothing. So my father, my uncle, and I, we were selected for slave labor. Our welcoming committee, you know, when I came back a year later, this lady, Ili Klinka, gave me 3 pictures of my family. This was the biggest treasure that I brought with me to Canada. Even the pictures disappeared. And in some places, survivors that came back, they had to buy back pictures from the local people. They said, "We want Levi jeans. We'll give you back a picture. We want this, we want that." Think about this. So these pictures were really, really treasures. And I look at this picture. My mother, not only was she a mother with all the worries, she fed us a balanced diet. She was a seamstress. You see these clothing, these outfits that we are wearing, she couldn't go to a store and get it off the shelf. She made all these things for us. Our shirts, our underwear. This picture was taken in 1940. You see, we were marked, we were photographed. The police wanted to know what every Jewish family looked like. So I don't have a picture of my little sister. She was born in 43. This was taken in 1940. And this is a cattle car standing on a track in Birkenau, Auschwitz II today. This is the huge building, the guard tower with machine guns and searchlights. And this is the main track coming in. And for Hungarian Jews, they built 2 extra tracks in 43, track 2 and track 3. And this is the makeup of Auschwitz-Birkenau. This is a death camp and partial labor camp. There's a separate women's camp, men's camp. Here's the transport, arrived, their tracks. My family simply made a left turn. There were no goodbyes said here. My mother with her 3 children, my grandparents, were marched into gas chamber of Crematoria 2, where they were murdered by gas, 2,000 people at a time in a chamber. There were 4 of these huge machines, killing machines. Crematoria 2, 3, 4, and 5. And these are pits where Hungarian Jews were being burned. So this is the platform. This is where the separation happened. And so think a transport was anywhere from 4,500 to 5,000 people. They demanded that kind of a shipment at the time because they were very astute. They needed to know that how they had to feed the gas chambers and crematoria. It had to work 24 hours. So there's 50 cattle cars. The people are pulled out from the cattle cars. And the inmates in their striped outfits, they come and they remove all the goods from the cattle cars. And they put on this platform 50 piles of goods. And then the big trucks arrive and they load all these goods, and it's being taken to a few barracks. It was called Canada, where every bit of clothing and whatever people brought with them was taken apart. They knew that people would hide a gold coin in a little bun or a diamond in a tube of toothpaste. People would sew in currency in the shoulder pads of jackets or clothing. They laid out this plan. It was called the Final Solution to the Jewish Problem in 1942. In Wannsee, Reinhard Heydrich laid it out verbatim. We're going to take their clothing away. We'll find everything they brought. And the gold crowns will be knocked out after the bodies were gassed. And they check inside the bodies and melted down into bricks. And Oskar Gröning was carrying this loot to the Reichsbank in Berlin. And he was asked by our lawyer, "Where did you take it?" He said, "I took it to the Reichsbank." "Did you get a receipt?" "No." Imagine what kind of business this SS was running. By the way, this was an SS division called the Totenkopf Division, the Death Head Division of the SS. Their insignia was a skull and bones, crossbones. So let me go back. Sorry. So after selection, we are processed. You see, there's processing, selection. The men were taken to the men's camp. Our clothing was taken away. The only thing we were allowed to keep were our boots. Went through a shower and were put into a barrack with triple-tier bunks. And this was the first time in 3 days or 4 days I was able to lie down on wooden planks. And I tell you, that was a sweet bit of rest to be off my feet after standing for 4 days. Next morning, raus schnell. This became the lingo here. Everything had to be done out and fast. And we were hauled out. This was May the 8th, 1944. So I'm standing somewhere around here looking at this entire infrastructure, hundreds of wooden barracks, and we're still naked. 2 men in their outfits brought a canister of liquid with some tea, and this was the first drink I had in 4 days. My father was asking him, "Are we going to see our families today?" But this is what they told us. They were laughing. "Where did you come from?" "We just came from Hungary in the middle of the night." They said, "In 1944, you don't know what this place is all about. Your families have gone through the chimney." And here I'm thinking, how does a person go through a chimney, or why? So we were given tattooed numbers and striped outfits, and 100 of us were selected for slave labor and marched down the road to Auschwitz I. And this is Auschwitz I. These are 32-story brick buildings. These were Polish military barracks. We are very lucky. I call this the 4 season of camps. Auschwitz I, because we had indoor plumbing. In none of the other camps there was one barrack that was used as a toilet, like a slab of cement with 100 holes where people had to sit. And so as a slave laborer, you live on a 300-calorie diet, and your body is fast disappearing right in front of your eyes, and your clothing is a cap, a jacket, pants, and boots. You have no underwear, no socks, no toilet paper, toothbrush. The only thing that you've got is what you've got on you, and you have a schissel, which is a dish, a metal dish or an aluminum dish, and you have to guard this and your boots with your very life, because boots became a very important thing. You're being marched out to a job site anywhere 5, 6, 7, 8 kilometers. Tens of thousands of us have worked in huge ammunition factories, especially the women. There was Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II, Auschwitz III, Monowitz, where IG Farben, this huge corporation, was building a huge factory making synthetic rubber. And had my father and uncle not been with me, I don't think I would have survived the first 2 weeks. I remember receiving that first soup out on the job. It stank to high heaven. It was called Dörrgemüse, a vegetarian soup. There was everything in it that you cannot imagine, but my father practically had to cram it down my throat. And 3, 4 days later, the soup tasted pretty good. The trouble was there wasn't enough of it. You know what hunger does? Hard labor, that you would need 5,000 calories a day. We lived on 300 calories a day, and they had it scientifically figured out. Your lifespan here will be anywhere from 3 to 4 months. So my father and uncle were selected out in July of 44. And by that time we knew selection meant certain death. Americans were already bombing, so I knew that the end was coming. I didn't know how the finale is going to happen. What are they going to do to us? So these selections happened in the middle of the night. I just want to describe to you this particular selection. We're sleeping the sleep of the dead after a long day of hard labor, and the loudspeakers are turned on, and very loud. It says, Achtung, Achtung. All inmates from barracks such and such go down naked to barracks such and such for selection. And we all had to run naked. And the next morning I ran to the barrack of my father and uncle, and they were not there. And you can't just go looking around. You have to line up to go to work. It's called appel. And when I came back at night from my work, I went to their barrack, and they were not there. So there was a quarantine area inside Auschwitz I, about 3 barracks where they put these people. And now I understand why they were kept there. I went there, and across the fence I was yelling my father's and uncle's name, and I managed to see them, and they managed to see me, and we had a chance just to say goodbye. My father gave me a blessing, and he told me that if I managed to survive, I have to tell the world what happened. So I was devastated. A few weeks later, I had a terrible beating by an SS guard. He hit my head with the butt of his rifle. I lost a lot of blood. I went into shock. I couldn't get up on my feet. I was hauled back to Auschwitz I. And there was a surgery in Auschwitz I. And I spoke about the deception that the Nazis used. There was a surgery, and the surgeons were 2 Polish political prisoners. This was simply because they brought the International Red Cross, and they said, look, we have a surgery, we take good care of our people. And I was operated on, and if you couldn't walk away 2 days later from the hospital, you were loaded on a stretcher, on a truck, and taken to the gas. So we were in this holding area there, and Dr. Rozheshko pulled me off the stretcher. He brought me into the prep room of the operating area, the surgery, and he gave me a lab coat, and I became the cleaner. And I was working for him for 6 months, right up till January the 12th, 1945. So there were 2 kinds of doctors in Auschwitz and Birkenau. Doctors swear the Hippocratic Oath that they will do no harm. Dr. Mengele, who was the angel of death, and his doctors were doing experiments on thousands and thousands of twins. They killed 1 twin, and they injected one twin with all kinds of terrible things. And if she died, they would kill the other twin to see how the difference in the bodies, in the organs, and so on. Also, he was working, he wanted to know how each German woman could have multiple births. Body parts were shipped from here to all the teaching universities in Germany and Austria. The gold was carried to the Reichsbank. The women's hair was baled by the ton and shipped to Germany. If you go to Auschwitz today, you'll see a roll of material made from women's hair. So Dr. Rozheshko, I will never know why he endangered his life to save mine, but I tell you, I'm very thankful that he did this. Dr. Rozheshko survived the death march. He remained in Mauthausen, and I went on to 2 other camps. So here is Oscar Gröning. He was 20 on the picture. That's him. He was in court. And this is Reinhard Hanning. So just a couple of things. He was asked in court by our lawyer, whose name is Thomas Walter, and He's a Rechtsanwalt, he's a retired judge. He's been a judge for 30 years, and he took on this pro bono with two of his colleagues. It was a lot of work. So he asked Oscar Gröning, why did you join the SS? He said, because of their prestigious uniform. And Oscar Gröning said, I was there, I saw it, I heard it, I smelled it, but I wasn't part of the killing machine. So Thomas Walter asked him, did a Jew have a chance to leave Auschwitz alive? He says, absolutely not. So he asked him, well, what about these children? So Oscar Gröning says to him, he says, you don't understand, it's because of their Jewish blood. That's why we had to kill them. Imagine. An SS man was an SS man at 93 or whatever age he was. Some worse things. And this Reinhard Hanning, you see, if an SS man stopped us inside the camp, you had to clip together and put your feet together and look down. You had to whip off your cap and report. A9892 humbly reports and look on the ground because you were not allowed. A Jew, how dare you look into the eyes of an SS man? This SS man, sorry, this SS man was told by the judge, I didn't go back for the verdict. The judge was Anki Gruda. And in both cases, the judges said, those that wore the uniform, the criminal outfit of the SS, were part and parcel of the machine, of the killing machine. And the judge told Reinhard Hanning, see, these people, the witnesses, they were not allowed to look in your eye. And here, 75 years later, you do not want to recognize these people as Jews here. So I just want to say that there are people today who say the Holocaust never happened. You see, the killers were their own bookkeepers. In German there is a saying, Ordnung muss sein, order must be. Those that had a tattooed number, they kept records. And these records were found in Auschwitz about 20 years ago, and it's in the museum archives today. And what this is, you'll see, these are tattooed numbers. The tattooed numbers change to A. These are Hungarian transports. And this is my father, 9891. My number is 9892. My uncle is 9893. And this is what happened to them. That's the English translation of the German document. On July the 9th, 1944, the following prisoners were selected for Streptococcus hemolyticus, never to be seen again. Tens of thousands of people were used by pharmaceutical companies. They were injected with all kinds of terrible things to produce pharmaceuticals. This is my father's and my uncle's last will and testament. And this is what the women looked like. The women had it 1,000,000 times harder than men, simply because they were women. You see one rag that they're wearing, there's no underwear, there's no hygiene products. If you find a piece of rag to cover your head, it's like you hit a jackpot. Some women came in sandals and their feet were cut into ribbons. I saw them grading a road. And they had women SS guards. Brutal. So women were truly the heroines in this camp. And this is the inside workings in the gas chambers. You might want to read this. I picked this out from a book of documents. Here is an engineer who went to university, who works for Ludwig and Ernest Topp. They are the premier manufacturers of cremation ovens. I think they're still in business today. And he says he joined up the furnaces, the huge ventilating machines so they can save on energy, to join 3 and 8 muffles furnaces. And he did this in his own time at home, and he's asking for a bonus, and he received 150 Reichsmarks. And he said, Heil Hitler, Kurt Prüfer was his name. So this is Dr. Rojeshko. I met the family the first time in 2010. I went to Warsaw, I tracked down the family, and Dr. Rojeshko died about, I think, in early 70s. And this is his family, and I see them every year. I go to Poland with different groups. And this is the operating room. I was so lucky to be working here as a 15-and-a-half-year-old running an operating room that was, had I not had those skills, they really carried me cleaning, the floors had to shine, disinfecting instruments. I truly am the best cleaner there is today, even today. I love cleaning. And this was the death march from Auschwitz, 4 days and nights walking in freezing weather. And then we were loaded into open flat cars and went to Dresden, Pilsen, occupied Czechoslovakia. In Pilsen, we were standing at a railway station. I didn't know what the name of the station was. You see, after dark in January, no trains can move around, and everything is blacked out because the British are bombing at night, and a locomotive that is pulling cars, there's sparks coming out from the chimney, and the fighter planes would pick it up and they would shoot at the. So you stand all night in pitch dark, and there was a bombing raid, and shrapnel was flying all over the place. Next morning, I look around. It was probably January the 20th or the 21st, and there was an overhead bridge, and there were Czech people with bread baskets, you know, like bakers would sell buns, and they were throwing bread inside the cattle cars. That was the most amazing thing, even though I couldn't get a piece of bread. But, you know, simply seeing Czech people who cared threw bread, and the guards were yelling at them, "Don't throw bread, these are Jews." And they kept throwing bread, and finally they took their Schmeissers, they were called, their submachine guns, and they sprayed the bridge, and the people ran away. I wound up in Mauthausen, over here, and from there to Melk, and I wound up in Ebensee, and I was liberated there. This was Liberation Day. These were some young people who managed to be able to stand on their own feet because typhus was killing us. And I remember May the 6th, 1945, when I could hear there was some heavy equipment was grinding coming up the mountain, and the tank came through the gate, and it had a white star on it, and there were black soldiers sitting on the turret, and they were in total shock of what they were looking at. This was a crack unit attached to General Patton's Third Army. They went through some real big battles, but they've never seen anything so terrible. Imagine thousands and tens of thousands of decomposing bodies who were not, they were simply there in the square. And I met up with Johnny later, and I visited him in New Jersey. This is my home in Slovakia. There's Iliklinka with her daughter. She's not alive anymore. So this beautiful house, we had a fence here that's gone, and there's a scrapyard here. And we were filming there this June or July this year. And I was standing there, and somebody came in a wheelchair from down the road, and he recognized who I was. And everybody thought, isn't this amazing? Here's somebody that knew my name is Tibor, and he was yelling, "Tibi, Tibi." So we invited him to have lunch with us. There were 9 of us, and so and I spoke to him in Hungarian, which nobody else could understand. I said, "Tell me, what went on here in 1944 when we were sealed off in the school?" "Oh," he said, "we had such a terrible time." I said, "What happened to my best friend Farkas?" He says, "Oh, we had a terrible time." "What happened to the livestock, the furniture?" So asking 3 times and not getting an answer. And so this is what the mindset is. For Europe, this was an economic grab right across continental Europe. And properties were taken away. The scrapyard, I went back in 1992, and he practically kicked me out of the yard. He said to me, "Do you want to buy the house?" I said, "No, this is my house." So I was back there this year, and there was a guide with us from Prague, and who knows about properties and so on. So he went to the registry, and I asked them to see if there's my name and Deutsch and Lichtmann and these. Everything was erased from the registry. So he said, "We'll go to another town where they have the lot sizes and the lot plans." They said, "Well, why do you want to know this?" So somebody he said, "Well, look, I bought a property not far from here, and I knew that there were some Jewish people here, and I just want to know that I have a clear title." I said, "Okay." So they brought this binder, and there it was, my grandfather's name and my grandmother's name on the lot size. Lies. They already erased registries. This is in the Slovak Republic. So I arrived in Quebec City last week, was 70 years ago, October 25th. I was put on a train and sent to Toronto, and my life simply unfolded here in this amazing country. And this is my 4th generation. Our great-grandchildren, this is, her name is Yehudit, she's now 11. Elisheva and Mikhail, they live in Jerusalem. And my book, of course, it's amazing, just a little bit of a, every book has to have a sort of a happy ending, and this is somewhat in a happy ending. Had I not written this book, I would have missed out on very important things. After it was launched in 2016, I had a phone call from New York, and he says to me, his name is Josh Eisen, and he said, "We are cousins." I said, "How?" He said, "Well, look, I'll be in Toronto tomorrow," and he came with a family tree. I didn't know that my grandfather had 6 siblings, 4 boys and 2 girls, that emigrated to the United States in 1919, after the First World War. And a year later, we had a gathering in Manhattan. 98 people, Eisners, 3 and 4 generations came to this amazing meeting. And so Josh went back. He lives in New York. He says, "I got to go back and see if I can find any markers." And so he went to my town. I said, "Go to the cemetery." He said he didn't see anything. I said, "Go to the next town." So he went to the next town, and he found a grave of our great-grandfather, whose name is, in Hebrew, it says Tzvi Yaakov Jacob Eisen. And he brought me a birth certificate of my grandfather. He was born in 1867, and he's a great-grandfather, so I would have never found this. There were about 15 graves in this town were saved from the Jewish cemetery because they built a soccer field The remains were not moved, and these 15 stones were moved to a Christian cemetery, and they are looking after 15 stones because most of cemeteries in Europe, either the stones were taken away, used as foundation, or broken or sunken into pieces and so on. So, why do we speak? You know, here I am. Next year is going to be Liberation 75. We've been liberated. You know, think about it. You're liberated, but are you really free? I mean, the battle that I had coming back from the camp, where your entire support group is gone, how do you start? So I've been speaking for 31 years. And you know, this poison of hatred against Jews is well and alive right here. I just came back from Vancouver. It's gone up 60% from the previous year. Think of what happened, the process that started in Nazi Germany. It starts with the Jews, but it does not end with the Jews. Here's a poster of my face beside a synagogue. Somebody last year in July, on a Sabbath night, on Friday night, I had a call on Saturday that my picture was defaced, and what he put on there is Achtung. I just told you what Achtung means to me. When they're waking you up from the sleep of the dead and you're going for a selection, somebody put this Achtung on my head, on my face in Toronto. Everybody said it was a crank. It took the police about 5 days to declare this a hate crime. So students asked me, Mr. Eisen, what can we do? I said, you know, you need to stand up. You must never be a bystander. You need to say, we will not allow you to do this. You cannot do this, not in our school, not in our city, not in this country. So I'll leave it at that. Something to think about. I don't know how my time is, but maybe we have some time for some questions, perhaps. Okay.
Does anybody have a question card that you want to share? Yeah, let's just open it up. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Dr. Eisen, I just wanted to thank you for coming today. We spoke a bit earlier. Because I'm in the business of education, I know how important it is to have people like you telling your eyewitness accounts of your suffering. And it's very important, as you said, to make everybody aware of the fact that nobody is exempt from this kind of persecution and maybe even genocide. If we don't stand up for each other, there'll be nobody left.
That's right.
My question, there is a question.
Okay.
I know you speak Hungarian, and I have other friends whose parents were saved by Raoul Wallenberg, actually from the trains on their way to Auschwitz. I know you probably know who Raoul Wallenberg is.
Yeah.
Can you tell us if you know more than the general public knows, and what is your opinion of him?
Raoul Wallenberg was a Swedish diplomat in Budapest. You know, it's amazing. Imagine this German machine, this killing machine. If you had a document with a stamp, you know, you're okay. Isn't this idiotic? So Raoul Wallenberg was running around writing Swedish papers that these people are under Swedish protection. There were many heroes. Raoul Wallenberg was in Budapest, practically took Jews off, and they respected the document. They looked at it and said, it's good. And he took off people off the transports, I think about 80,000. There are many people that saved Jews They are not known. You know, there was a Japanese diplomat, Sampo Sugihara, who was in Lithuania. So, you know, when the Germans were moving up towards Lithuania, the Jews knew that they have to get out of there. So they went to the Japanese consul. So he sent a telex to Japan. He said, these people are women, children. And they said to him, you can't do that. So he just didn't take that as law. He and his wife were writing. They didn't have a secretary anymore. And with their bare hands, they were writing Japanese protection papers. Over 5,000 documents. And these people were put on a train, went to Russia, and through the Trans-Siberian Railway, they wound up in Vladivostok. And the Japanese picked them up and they took them to Kobe. And when Japan was towards the end, they took these Jews from Kobe and they took them to Shanghai. Over 5,000 Jews were saved. There were many amazing heroes. There are many we call the righteous among the nation. Just a couple examples. There was a nurse in the Warsaw ghetto. She came into the ghetto because the Nazis were deathly worried about typhus, you know, that will spread, it will kill their soldiers. They didn't care about the Jews in the ghetto. So she was allowed to come in every day she was driving a horse and buggy. She took out 2,500 children, smuggled out, and she placed them with Christian families. And she kept a record of who these children were placed with. And she was caught by the Gestapo. They broke every bone in her body, but she wouldn't give up the document. She survived. She just died. She was 90-something. There was a documentary made about her, Irina Senderova. And when I go with groups to Poland, March of the Living, we have some of it. These are now in their late 90s, and we have their children or grandchildren who come to the event. There were many people that did amazing things to save a Jew. If they found out, they would line you up against the wall and shoot you on the spot. You know, Anne Frank was hiding with her family in an attic in Amsterdam. And she was given up by a Dutch person to the Gestapo. A Jew's life was worth a pound of sugar. If you gave up a Jew or, half a pound of tobacco, this was it. If you reported a Jew, you'd have got a half a pound of flour or something. So these people were truly saints. There were many others, and we call those the righteous among the nation. In Jerusalem, there's a place called the Yad Vashem, which is the biggest documentation center. And there's the Avenue of the Righteous. And for all these people, and there are now thousands of beautiful olive trees that have been growing, and there's a brass plaque, and to remember these people. And you know, I keep thinking, would I have been in their shoes? Would I have been that brave to save another person? You know, I'll never know. But that is, this is what some people did. No matter what religion you were or they were, they said, this you cannot do. We're all human beings. So.
And I think we have time for one more question, and I think this question works very nicely with what you've just said about the righteous and standing up for what we believe in against great injustice. So there was a question from the audience that as survivors age and as we lose more and more survivors, what do you think is the best way to keep the message of never forget accomplished in the future?
Well, I'm a speaker, and I have colleagues and friends. We've been speaking for the Holocaust Center for many years, and I also do a lot of work with the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center. And this is what we've been doing. We've been going to schools for 30 years plus, and it's very important to write it down, and we hope that our own families, second and third generations, will be upstanders and not bystanders. So it is very important to remember for our own good. You know, there's a saying, I forget now who said that, without history there is no memory, and without memory there is no future. So this is everybody's business, no matter what country, where you are, who you are. This can happen anywhere if it's allowed to happen. Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eisen, for sharing your story and for giving us this very important message.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks. Okay.
So this is where you come in. Dr. Eisen has just told us that memory is crucial when we are looking at the future, and telling stories is crucial when we are trying to remember. So we have a number of boards that have been created by students of Gen Ed 500. And do you want to introduce those? Yeah.
Unfortunately, genocide and human rights abuses are a global phenomena. In the Gen Ed program, students do research to better understand these issues and to find our place in the global story. For these posters, students have covered essential topics from the slave trade to climate change. Projects focus on the Second World War, the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia, the anti-Sikh riots of 1984, the 1994 Rwandan genocide, and the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, the crisis currently in Syria, and South African apartheid.
So we invite everyone to visit the West Vista and to view the exhibits of students' work, and students will be there to answer questions about their work as well. We're very excited about this very important work that the students are doing. Because of this, and to encourage further scholarship, we're offering a prize for the best engagement with scholarship. And this is where you come in. This is going to be decided by you. So after you take a look at all of the posters and you talk to the students, there are two ways to vote for the best poster and the most critical engagement with scholarship. There are cards on the table, and you can write down the number of the poster that you would like to vote for. Or if you have a device and you'd like to use it, you can go to menti.com, MENTI, and use the code, which is 17295. And when you sign in there, you can vote for the best presentation and poster. So we have about a half an hour for that. So I invite you to please go out and check out the scholarship. Thank you so much. Great. And we will reconvene here in about half an hour for the presentation of the award. Thank you.
I think we're all really enjoying the moments that we have to see the posters and speak to Max, but we will reconvene in about 2 minutes to announce the poster winner. All right, are we ready? Whoa! Oh, the microphone is on. Our guest, our keynote guest, is very popular. Before we announce the winner, I would like to thank very much the two students who were here earlier today who did the land acknowledgement for us. Oh, they are still here. Yes, I see that. Would Cheyenne and Ellie please come up? Or Eli, you please come up. Thank you. Each of you get a certificate, but you also get a copy of Max's book.
So it was a close race with a lot of excellent scholarship, but the winner is poster number 8, the South African Cape Town water crisis. So congratulations to that group. If that group, anyone from that group is here, would you come up? So we have certificates for the winners and copies of Max's book. So we have Arshana Kumar, Srivitha Vyajan, and Hari Krishna Santosh. So thank you so much to everybody for creating these wonderful posters, for participating in the event, and for voting. And thanks especially to our winners. So what I've learned from these stories is that survival in the midst of cruelty and inhumanity comes because there are individuals who want to help and create change, who would not let themselves become numb to horror, who exhibited courage in the face of dangerous societal pressure. In the future, no matter who we choose to be, all of us are going to have to make these moral choices. We make them every day. Some of them are big moral choices and some of them are small, but it's our responsibility as global citizens to make them. So by coming here, you've made a choice to perpetuate scholarship and to remember. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to join us this morning. And I hope you'll continue to reflect on the testimony we've heard. And I hope that if you haven't read Dr. Eisen's book yet, that you do, because it is a phenomenal work. This event was hosted by Centennial College Libraries in partnership with the School of Advancement and the Center for Global Citizenship, Education, and Inclusion as part of the Neuberger Holocaust Education Week 2019. We would like to express our gratitude to Max Eisen for sharing with us his story, which I will certainly never forget. And I would like to express my personal gratitude to my mom, Pepe Lucas, for co-hosting with me.
Okay. I would also like to thank you for participating in today's program. Our appreciation to our guests and to Centennial College students and staff for coming to this event. A special mention goes to the HEW committee members for helping to organize this important event. Jane Burpee, Barbara Weisfeld, Mira Mather, Nita Saini, Nicole D'Souza, Alana Lucas, Eileen Besser, and Gosha Trusky. Thank you very much.
I really want to say a very deep thank you needs to go to Gosha Trotsky, who has done the major role of pulling this off today. And to all of the students and the faculty from the School of Advancement Gen Ed program who also participated and helped make this a very successful morning. Thank you. We actually have certificates for every student who participated by creating a poster. They're up here divided by the group, so before they leave, they come up and take a copy of their certificate with them. We'll be up here helping you find yours. And here ends the program, so thank you.